instead of addressing the urgent problems of poverty and disinvestment, instead of restoring the funding that he has cut from healthcare and food assistance, instead of doing anything to address the cost of living crisis, the fact that the rent is too high and wages are far too low in this country, this president spoke of an America that does not exist for hundreds of millions of Americans across this country.
Welcome back. That was Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson speaking at an alternate event last night aimed at countering the president's State of the Union address. In his remarks, Mayor Johnson described President Trump's State of the Union remarks as rambling and incoherent phrases of nothing and hitting the administration for not doing enough to address concerns about affordability, an issue Democrats are zeroing in on heading into the midterms. Joining me now is Democratic Mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson. Mayor Johnson, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So we are going to get to the affordability issue, of course, in just a moment, but I do want to start with a big moment that Republicans are seizing on from last night's State of the Union. Take a look. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
Tonight, I'm inviting every legislator to join with my administration in reaffirming a fundamental principle. If you agree with this statement, then stand up and show your support. The first duty of the American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens.
And today, Vice President Vance called that moment a sad commentary on the Democratic Party. Do you think it was a mistake for Democrats not to stand up?
I think it's a mistake for this president to continue to find wedge to divide people in this country, right? When I think about the history of Chicago, established by a Black Haitian immigrant and a Potawatomi woman, and they established what is now the global capital of the world. That's the story of America. And if this president was serious about ensuring that we had a pathway to citizenship and to ensure that our borders are secure, he would use the fact that he controls every single level of government to put forth legislation that could do just that. This president has demonstrated over and over again that he's more interested in dividing people by race, by whether they are documented or undocumented, than he is motivated to actually unite people around the values that working people are concerned about. As the mayor of the city of Chicago, what people talk to me about every single day is how we build safe and affordable communities. That's what my focus has been. That's what we're doing in Chicago. And it's quite disappointing that this president has not caught on with the hopes and aspirations of working people.
Well, one of the biggest flashpoints certainly last night and right now is the issue of ICE, how it's being deployed. You have called for abolishing ICE. What do you say to Democrats who argue that goes too far and could actually give Republicans the upper hand on that issue politically?
Well, what has gone too far is this president. He has worked outside of the confines of the Constitution. We have filed multiple pieces of litigation against this president because he has overreached, and we have prevailed. In every lawsuit that he has put forth against our city, we have beat back. Look, a dad was dropping his children off to school and was murdered by federal agents, and then they lied about it. Another woman was shot multiple times in the city of Chicago. They lied about it, pressed charges against her. Those charges were later dropped. We know that, Renee and Alex and those families are still grieving because they too were not just shot, but they were murdered. We have seen this president circle Black Hawk helicopters over apartment buildings on the south side of Chicago where long guns were placed in the faces of Black women and children were zip tied. A Black man was put into an illegal chokehold, which we know an illegal chokehold is a death sentence for a Black man in this country. That has gone too far. This president is not serious about immigration reform. He's certainly not serious about education, and his priorities are not with the priorities of working people. It's becoming increasingly more unaffordable to live in this country, and this president has done nothing to do that. The only thing that he has done is he has secured the wealth for the ultra wealthy and big corporations, which we know the wealth concentrated in the hands of the few people has caused a great deal of turmoil. And that's why in Chicago, we're providing a different vision, building affordable homes, investing in education, creating good paying jobs for families. That's what working people want us to do. That's what Democrats have to continue to lead on.
Well, let me ask you about the issue of affordability. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, prices have actually gone up in the Chicago metro area by as much as 7% since you became mayor. Why is that, and what's your argument for why Democrats are the party to bring prices down?
Well, first of all, what we've seen with this president, with those tariffs that have been deemed illegal, that created an additional burden of, on average, $2,000 per household, right? So you're seeing a reflection of his poor policies. What we've done in the city of Chicago, I've invested in our education, but we also have made sure that our teachers are supported, our child care workers are supported. We just gave child care workers a raise in our city, an additional $7 million in our budget to do just that. $500 million into our public education system. We've hired 31,000 young people just to work over the summer. While at the same time, I've invested over $1 billion for economic development and housing, which is the largest economic and housing investment in the history of Chicago. That's what we're doing. To beat back against the Trump administration, we have to double down on our efforts to ensure that our public institutions are supported and that we're growing our economy. Look, we have economic development that is happening on the west side of Chicago, the 1901 project just outside of the United Center. We're talking about $8 billion of new investment on the southeast side of Chicago, where there hasn't been investment in over 30 years, where the steel mills used to exist. We have a brand new entity, Quantum computing will be the first spot in America for this new technology that's going to draw economic development throughout that entire region. 20% of the world's fresh water. Of course, we have, one of the most diverse economies in the entire country. And so the economic development that's happening in the city of Chicago is certainly strong, but we are competing up against an administration at the federal level that has a great deal of disdain and animus against working people. What we're doing in American cities across this country is actually working. This president, of course, is opposed to our values, and that's where we're going to continue to push back.
All right, Mayor Brandon Johnson, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome anytime.
Coming up after the break, with Texas voters about to head to the polls, Speaker Mike Johnson says he sent a message to Republican Congressman Tony Gonzalez as the Texas lawmaker faces mounting pressure to resign after being accused of having an affair with a staffer who died by suicide. The panel's next on Meet the Press Now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.